years ago, here at the first conference on personal meaning, Ernesto Spinelli, in his brilliant lecture, he finished with a quotation from Samuel Beckett. And the quotation, approximately like this. So you try and you fail. That's normal. Try again. Fail again. Fail better. This is the essence of our interaction with life. We can never avoid failures. We can never avoid mistakes. The only thing we can is to fail better. So, very important thing of existential worldview, very important point is the awareness of our imperfection. And it's a very important prerequisite for the responsibility. Yes, we are imperfect, and we can fail, and we may make a mistake. And we make a mistake not because some other forces some other evil forces interfered, and in another way we would definitely come to the perfect result, but due to some evil forces we could not come to the perfect result. No, it's the nature of life itself, imperfection. And the only thing we can do is to try again and to fail better and to take the responsibility for our attempts, for what we are trying.
It almost seems to be a paradox of the comment made earlier about the thief.
Mm-hmm.
We're looking at a person with narcissistic or sociopathic tendencies. If you look at these dimensions of Christ, and you commented on that none of them have an absolute value, a person could commit an act of violence towards another or an act of crime, look at the price, put the price down very, very low, and continue making those regular choices.
Yeah, I'll comment on this after I tell about the last kind of currency. First I'll finish with the anxiety and guilt, just a little bit. With the mental states, in fact, it's somewhat underestimated dimension in contemporary psychology. We do a lot of things in order to provide some desired states. For instance, what is a gift? What do we present when we present a gift to someone? In fact, what is important in gift? The only thing that is important is it's a kind of, the gift itself is a kind of mediator, a psychotechnic tool, a means to produce some state. The meaning of a gift, it's very evident in case of, say, flowers, souvenirs. Not so evident in case of more substantial gifts. But in fact, the most important result, the most important point is that the meaning of gifts is the production of some emotional states in the person, in the addressee of the gift. The same point about, a lot of things about the environment. Restaurants. Why do we pay much more money for the food in restaurants than we would pay just for the same food in other places. Because what we pay for is not the food itself, it's just the state. The whole state, the state provided by the complex environment and food and persons serving us and the interior, the rooms, all this. It's a complex and music, all this produces some state. And what we pay for is this state. Probably, if we are not satisfied if the food itself is good, but something has happened that destroyed the desired state. So, the states are the one very important currency, and we must in terms of paying, in terms of states for the choices, we can choose something that would produce guilt. It's guilt. There is, consider, for instance, an ethical dilemma, a very simple thing. Well, I am walking, a simple thing. I am walking between two arms of a river, and I hear the shouting, and a child is sinking to the right, and 3 childs are sinking to the left. What to do? So, just the simple pragmatic calculation would mean that you should save 3 children rather than 1. You save 3 lives, and here just 1 life, and you have no time to both to the right and to the left. But the real point of this dilemma is that you may make either choice, but in fact the ethical position means that you cannot feel right in either case. You cannot make the right choice in this situation. The real ethical positions means that you can understand the limitation of your possibilities, but this gives not the excuses. There is some in any case there is some loss, something unchangeable, and any result in this case would be unfavorable, and there is no true decision. So you may choose any of the options, either run to the right or to the left, but in fact no one of the decisions can be right, so that you get rid of any remorses and feelings of guilt and something like this. So it's the point of human imperfection. We must be aware of our own limitations and imperfection, and this is the situation that helps us to become aware of our limitations. Yes, we are not perfect. In fact, we cannot say, oh, and this is the sad thing, and we must, and it's a natural thing that we have a feeling of guilt. But we have not. This is not something we cannot escape. So the anxiety is a very, very important thing, because there is a very I can refer in very many points to Salvatore Maddi in this respect, that many choices. The choices always, he wrote, imply that we choose between the past and the future. We may to choose status quo, the stability, and we may choose something new. We may choose the future. And if we choose the future, we choose something unknown. And if we choose something unknown, we cannot predict, we cannot foresee. So we must accept the anxiety that always accompanies this kind of choice. But we cannot move forward without anxiety, because anxiety is a sign that something cannot be predicted. We cannot be sure. But this is the nature of life. We can never be. We can be sure only in the past, and not even this, not always. But generally, only the past, what is already there, gives us some feeling of being sure. We can never be sure about anything in the future.
Just before you got into this, I think you were saying that the fact that you're conscious of a decision and make that decision, recognizing that it's your own, doesn't mean that you're being more ethical or moral than if you just blame the decision on something else.
All the time I'm touching the moral problems, and a lot of time can be also devoted to discussing moral problems. Yes, I cannot. Well, it's really, it is a very important thing, but it's a very important thing. I just don't know now in this direction, in what direction to move, because probably it's worth discussing I'll postpone it a little bit. I promise you to come to it a little bit later. To the relations between moral problems and those in this existential position. And the last thing I wanted to state is that the anxiety is something we have to take in order to move forward. It's the price. If we choose something that would move us to the direction of the development of in the direction of changes, in the direction of being alive, then we must accept anxiety as the price for it. If we try to exclude anxiety from our life, then we cannot move forward. Anxiety is a rather unpleasant thing, but we can't help it. We can't help it. It's the price. And trying to get rid of those unpleasant things of anxiety, of guilt, we get rid of our own, of the possibilities for our own development, for our own being alive. That's why so many people cease being alive long before their death. Just that's why. They don't want to bear anxiety. It's so unpleasant. And they pay this price. For them, getting rid of anxiety is probably more important than being alive. Probably it would be more important for them if they could become aware of this alternative. Usually, those simple choices are made without being aware of it. Just get rid of anxiety, without thinking of the price for it, without getting the idea of some price to pay for it.
I'm wondering what you think about the increasing role that medication is playing in our society.
Yeah. Go on. Yeah, indeed. It's one of the ways, yes. It's one of the ways just to get rid of undesired states. And not a...
What I often tell my clients is, your problem is you're not anxious enough.
Your problem is...
Your problem is you're not anxious enough.
Aha. Yeah. And fifth form of currency. So it's the last on my list, but I'm not sure, I don't think that this list is complete. And I hope that you may add something new to this list. Fifth form of currency is ourselves. We may pay in terms of ourselves. So we doing some choices. We pay with some coherence, with some authenticity, with the ability to change. So when we try to get some pragmatic results, accomplishments, so we may too much adjust to what is required for this. Too much adjustment is no better than too little adjustment. We must keep the choice to adjust or not to adjust to the degree to which it is necessary, to which it is helpful and healthy. But paying attention to the price of being oneself is a very important price. But no one of those currencies has an absolute value. So we must try to see our choices in all of those important contexts without being sticked to one of them. Certainly, it's not good, it's not healthy when a person strives to the success, to the career, to the money at the expense of being oneself and feeling good. Certainly it's not healthy. But it's not healthy also when one strives to perfection, to self-improvement, to spirituality, without paying any attention to his wife and children that are starving there. No attention to practical issues, only self-improvement. Well, it's also not healthy. Different cultures put different emphasis, different cultures stress different values of those groups. And we may try to learn from different cultures to see those different currencies, those different things. Yeah.
Can I add to list one?
Yeah.
Okay. But I have to humble myself. This is an addition from Kierkegaard.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. In works of love, Kierkegaard feels that the most punitive form of currency is the loss of an opportunity to become love itself. I resonate with that.
To become love itself.
Yes. In other words, it's his spiritual sense of the transcendent relationship to a God, but not God in the traditional fundamental self, but being able to contact and to express within oneself the inherent capability to love in the most Christian sense of love.
Yeah, I think yeah, I'm not sure. I think probably. I don't know. Can we? Well, it doesn't matter whether it's a 6 point, or probably it has something to do with the 5th point, oneself, because it's the way of the transformation of oneself. So the way of oneself. Well, thank you. It's a good addition. I don't think it's important whether it's special or not. Whether it's special or not, a special point or overlaps with what I said. Good. Some other additions. Well, probably from your own experience. How can it be, in your own experience, how can it be, example?
Okay.
It will help us.
And I resonate with that very deeply. I actually feel it is the most punitive currency. It's the deepest loss. And in my own experience, also in my anecdotal experience, not with my clients, what I see makes one most alive is when they find themselves, when they find themselves transcending in the moment from the mundane experience of, all the bad things that people do to them and happen to them and so forth, to moving to an experience of seeing people struggling themselves existentially and finding and locating love in the other person and responding to them from the assumption that love is also in the other person as well as self. I know that I've used a lot of words to explain it, but I have, in my own experience, as well as watching my patients, I've never seen anything more humbling and awe-inspiring than that experience.
I guess if you're characteristically making choices and know that you're making choices, then your sense of being controlled by the rest of the world falls away. And then what emerges is a loving sense, I guess.
Yes, but I add more of this. It's a concerted effort to locate love in self and other. That is what I call humanizing.
What do you call it?
Human. I would add one point to this, just because, a very important thing about love is that you should not expect some return love. True love is that it does not depend on what you get in response.
It is the Kierkegaardian sense. It's not a Kantian moral ethic. I do this because it gives me back. It's a Christian ethic. I do this for self and nothing more.
Yes.
You're also receiving that love that you're giving, right? It's coming, it's welling up within you, it's filling you before it stands up to
Yes.
The other concept that I would add to your list is loss of worldview.
Loss. What do you mean by loss of worldview?
Just like loss of self, polar.
Well, probably it's not the loss of worldview. Probably you mean the changes in worldview, because worldview is always there. It can change. It can be. So I had some faith in people. So I had some belief that people are good, and the people turned out to be not so good, and so my worldview changed. And now I no more treat people as inherently good. Yes, it's not the loss of worldview, it's the change of worldview. It's change for another one. Yeah?
Change yourself for another self.
Yeah. But, well, yes, probably it is. Yes, probably it is. But I'm not sure whether it is, yes, the price for the choice. It may be, yes, it's a consequences of some choice. Yes, it may be, so yes. Yeah.
I came in late, so I apologize. This says nothing. I'm getting the wrong impression. Some of the things that have been said, for example, when we were talking about a gift, have, to me anyway, or to other people, they sound more transactional than relational. And so I don't want to go away with the wrong impression. But they sound very transactional, like you give a gift to, the important thing about it is the state, as opposed to this is a relational activity that's going on, gift giving, or giving in a culture of getting, or what you were saying about love and so on. So could you speak to that and just tell me if I'm totally off?
Well, I don't see any principal contradictions. So the point that I was trying to express is that that there is some important reality embedded in our choices, is the reality of states, and we may strive for some states, and we may pay in terms of bearing some unpleasant states as a price for something important for us. This was the only context in which I introduced this idea of states. Well, and I would highly appreciate if someone would try to refer to one's examples, probably from one's professional practice or from one's life, about the situation of I could tell it unauthorized choice. So because the main problem is that one denies one's making a choice, and the problem is that in this case is just the most important thing, and the only thing, and it's rather important thing we can do, just to help a person to become aware of the choice as one's own.
What you were speaking about, in the matter of homelessness, I'm around a lot of the people in the Burnside area in Portland, and I jump myself. A lot of people feel very trapped when they make choices, and what I spoke about earlier, in the fact of currency and people that would steal, not like a thief, but that would feel that they would take and be able to get something without having to pay. This is a mind that
is with a lot of people that are homeless that are always getting things, so to speak, ripped off of them, and then they're going to say, you have to do this, and that's it. Or what choice do you want? They wouldn't feel that they have that choice, and yet, as far as considering consequences, paying, this is...
It's such a good example of currency. Actually, there's stress. It's a marriage couple. Okay. An ex-student asked if I would treat his mother, and when he called me at first, he said, "I'll try to be briefly important." But he called me at first, and he said, "Now this is a very special case," telling me she was very fragile. So I hesitated, but I took her on. Make a long story short, it's individual therapy that had a couples therapy aspect. The family is a Jehovah's Witness. She presents in therapy at the dissolution of a 26-year marriage at the hands, symbolically, the hands of her husband. Okay, they have 2 sons in their early 20s. She has not worked outside of the home during her whole life, but she has managed the financial assets of the many businesses that the family owns and her husband manages. To make a long story short, I'll just briefly say this. They both grew up in very stressful, dysfunctional backgrounds, where both of them actually lost their father, but she never knew her father, okay? And he lost his father at a very early age. His mother died when he was around 7 or 8, and both of them were raised by their maternal grandmother, who were alcoholics, okay? So they both had, a tremendous loss and deficit in nurturing. To make a long story short, okay, he ends up, after years of going back and forth with her, his main complaint, and the currency issue was alive in this marriage. Okay, he was never getting intimacy needs met by her, translated not only into affection but actual sexual intimacy relationships. Okay. He also has a great deal of difficulty with what he labeled her anger. Okay. When she came into treatment, I asked her, was there some truth to these perceptions? And she willingly said, which I think goes along with being a Jehovah's Witness, there was some effort at some transcendent function, although very primitive. I don't mean Jehovah's Witness, but how she utilized it. She said there is some truth. She has never been able to feel, and to express herself that way, but his ways, which were extremely, in her estimation, this was her narrative. This is what she wanted to see. His ways were extremely controlling, depriving, in which she could not be seen because he did not want to see her. Okay. So as she entered therapy, she gave me a litany, right, of all the terrible assaults upon her of denying her presence in the marriage. That her sons, if I would ask, would corroborate. Okay. I invited the husband in, and he came in, because I wanted to understand, to get all different perspectives. The husband's perspective was exactly what she said. He was deprived by years of a very unloving wife. Okay. The battles through the years had to do with currency. And in fact, during the treatment, he had insisted that because he felt he kept saying to her, as well as the children all these years, you contribute nothing, I contribute everything. And it was always the money that he brought into the household, and they were no good. This was his paradigm. Okay. So he insisted, I treated her, he did not want to participate. He had made up his mind he did not want to be married. Okay. But I continued to treat her. Now, through the treatment, she persisted on the narrative, okay, that how dare he's controlling controlling me again, and they had wars in which they were managing their business. One day he said to her, I want you to write down how much you do in this relationship. I want an accounting for your work, basically. And I'll write down how much I do. And this was all around if they ever split assets. Well, she resisted this, and months went by. Okay. And in treatment, which I'm not going to go into now because that's in my talk, okay, she came into something that, lo and behold, I think was a gift because it was the day on that I was reading for this son. And I've been seeing her about a year. But she came in and she said to me, you know, I gave him the accountant. Now, there's been a lot of changes. And I said, well, what did you say? He said, you know, I really don't want that accounting from you. She said, you know, I know it was never about the accounting, but I want to give you this accounting because I want to tell you how much you do that none of us could provide. I want you to know how much you've given to us that none of us could have provided without you. She had shifted from an accounting of, this is what I do, this is what I do, this is what I do, and this is how much we should split, to acknowledging that this man wants to have self-worth. That was a major paradigm shift that came from the law. The currency had changed completely.
So, not changed, but she has discovered another context, a new context, because what gives us some meaning is only the context. We can get some meaning of anything only within a context, and there was only one limited context that has provided one limited meaning of what was going on, and she discovered a new context that enriched the meaning of what was going on, that has given a new dimension to the meaning of what was going on. And the third context would give another dimension. So the idea of this multi-currency account is that we must discover different contexts that give meaning to our choices and to our options without making any of them absolute. And are there any comments about this currency issue?
Just a couple. James Hillman said that forgiveness was only possible in the light of discovering a wider context. So that sort of goes with what you're saying. I thought you were asking earlier for unauthorized choices.
Yeah.
I think I read in the program that men with aggressive behavior claim they can't control their behavior, but if you get into placebo, suddenly they do control their behavior, but they don't take any responsibility for it. Their behavior changes. They've exercised the responsibility, but in their meaning, they don't author that change in behavior.
Well, it's a very good. He can control. Yes, it's a wonderful example. Just because it illustrates pretty well that we cannot means that we don't want.
I thought of the example of somebody who's been victimized by sexual assault or whatever, and who's had the whole choice-making taken away from them in that instant, in that moment, and they seem to go through this process of relearning, slowly relearning to use the currency that they have access to their own resources, and that in fact when they start making their own choices again, they're taking back some of that control. But it's almost like they have been taken out of that interplay between making the choice and obtaining something in some regard from that. And so in a very kind of condensed process in therapy, they relearn that existential paradigm having those choices, but having the costs associated with them. And sometimes it's really difficult to get them to own that part after the assault happened, that in fact they do still have access to that inner play.
Yeah, thank you. Certainly it's not easy, but a very important point is that it should not be easy. One of the things that I repeat again and again, why do you think it should be easy? So yes, it's really a very important point. Just a moment. Several years ago, I wrote a review on master's research work about the adjustment of Afghanistan veterans in Russia. The main results were that I think it's common problems. The same that North Americans have with Vietnam veterans, and we had the same with Afghanistan veterans in the 80s and 90s. So the main result was that which of them experience the difficulties in adaptation in peaceful life, and which of them manage this problem rather effectively. And the results were that there are three groups of veterans. One of them tended to deny, to repress their Afghanistan experience, to forget it as soon as possible, and to live in a peaceful way, just to forget all this as a nightmare. It's one strategy. They had serious difficulties in adjustment. The second group, on the contrary, they highly evaluate their Afghanistan experience as the only true experience of their life, the only authentic, the only real, and what is going on here in the peaceful life is something wrong, false, unauthentic, and so on. They also had great difficulties in adjustment. The third group, that has no serious difficulties, they effectively coped with all this, was the group that managed to include both the military and the peaceful experience into one unified life context without splitting them into two different realities. And this was the strategy that led to success. Yeah.
Just to sort of expand on the people that have been heavily victimized in two different contexts, one being the, as we're talking about, the prisoner, the criminal situation. I think, I know that when people have been victimized a lot from the time they're infants, they've lost track of, just as this woman was saying, lost track of their ability to make decisions. And once they're able to empathize with themselves and are given that opportunity, sometimes they make a switch. One of the women that I worked with for quite a while in therapy had been abused to the point of torture from the time she was an infant, throughout her childhood and adolescent experience, and had gone on to be very violent and lived a very street-level sort of criminal existence for her young adult life, and despised herself for it. She didn't see herself as a violent person, but she was very violent. And finally, I learned how to use EMDR, and I used that in my work with her. And then she was able to see. In one session, we were working on her early childhood sexual abuse by her foster parent. She suddenly turned to me and said, "Oh, I get it. He hurt me back then. But ever since then, I've been hurting myself." But it wasn't until that moment, utilizing that technique, that she was finally able to get it in a deeper sense than just her part of her adult brain saying it. Now, now she was able to see it in a holistic sort of sense. And then she said, okay, now I can go into treatment. It's like now she could relieve herself of the self-abuse. Finally.
It's a very nice example, and it's the point that my wife Helena stresses always in her therapeutic work. Just that what matters is not what happens to you and what you experience and what you feel, but what you do with what you feel and with what happens to you. It's just this point exactly. And it's a very important thing. And another point I'd like to dwell on now is, well, also in this context, is the problem of self-crucifying. So the problem of when a person trying to deny one's own life, one's own interest for the sake of a spouse, of children, for someone else. But in fact, the point is who is making this decision, and the mother trying to devote the whole life only to the interests of her child as she understands it. Well, in fact, what do we see in this case? So it's a very often case. She has some reasons. She pays with the denying of one's own life, separate life, interest, and so on and so on. But what for? I cannot do anything for another person. I can do something only for some reasons of my own. Because in this case, the mother does not ask her children, what are your wishes, what do you want from me to do for you? And the most awful thing is that the most awful thing is that usually a person, usually such a mother, later sends a bill to her children in a psychological sense. So the child becomes due to this, so the mother makes them owe her, so makes them indebted and requires something that they would not, so it gives them something that probably they would not need, or would need in some other way, or would need in some other form or something else. Well, this is also the problem of choice. We try to use, well, it's a very interesting point, the problem of selfishness and altruism, and when we say that we do something for others, for someone else's sake, what is really the situation in this case? Can we do something for others? Can we neglect our own interests? Can we do something not directed at our own goals and motives? Probably this is probably the explanation of real altruistic behavior is not that I do something not for myself but for some other person. Probably the explanation would be that I am still doing some things for myself, but the concept of myself is somewhat extended. It includes other people, includes community. I'm doing some things for both for myself and for some other people included into this enlarged self. Well, it's a kind of enlarged self, and there is no contradiction in this kind of activity if I'm engaged in a truly altruistic activity. Well, if it's not the problem of reducing my own anxiety while saying that I'm doing something for the sake of my children, but in fact it's only the way of reducing my anxiety. No, it's a false case. But the case of true altruism can be explained through this extended self. So I get some idea of an enlarged system that includes myself and some other persons, probably in the ultimate case that includes the whole humanity, but it's not the humanity as something opposed to me, with the interests of the humankind as something opposed to my interests. No, it's a unit that includes my own interests, that includes me with my interests and the system with some common interests. And the way of solving problems then is the way of considering the common interests, and that's why I'm doing something definitely for myself, but at the same time for the larger community.
Would you relate that to Adler's concept of social interest?
Yes, it can. Adler's concept of social interest is just cooperation. Yes, cooperation with other people for the implementation of common goals. Yes. What in fact, what I'm saying is somewhat more complicated, because Adler's concept is more. This concept of social interest is somewhat more traditional. So it's a kind of social cooperation, and I'm saying not of social cooperation. I'm saying that in Adler's terms, there are separate persons with separate interests, and there are some points where those interests coincide, and they have some common goals, and they cooperate in this, so they make the forms of social relations. Well, what I'm saying is probably more in line with what Gregory Bateson wrote about the extended system. So, for instance, when a person is driving a car, one is making a unified system with this car, and there is no psychologically there is no borderline between a driver and the car. So they make the whole unit, and that's the same. Well, and the same. Erich Fromm said about psychological symbiosis between an infant and mother. So they make a unified system. There are no separate interests, so they interact with the world as one unit. This is what is more in line with what I'm saying, a kind of symbiosis and kind of extended system.
Some Adlerians, including myself, suggest that beyond Adler's concept of social interest, kind of look at the concept of actualization and Erickson's idea of going, and Kohlberg's moral development, evolving to the point that you're not just acting for the common good of humanity, acting in a way that's good for the universe, basically, the environment, the ecosystem, the universe, and not expecting any recognition or acknowledgement for it, but just simply acting in the common good because that's the right thing to do, without expecting to be acknowledged or rewarded or...
Well, now we come back to the issue of moral reasons for action and existential responsibility about their context, and it's a good point to link them together. Well, I have something tomorrow in my lecture. I plan to tell something about those things, about this higher level of regulation. But what I could answer now, one of the important things is the consciousness of our imperfection, because it's a point where we can make a distinction between fanaticism and some real and some real striving for good. Because if two teachers that strive for good with different somewhat ideas of what is good meet together, if we speak of real teachers, of real wizards, they can come to terms, they come to some agreement, despite any differences in their initial teachings. If two fanatics will meet with their different views of what is good and the most valuable, they will never come to an agreement. So this awareness of one's imperfection, of one's openness for mistakes, of one's openness to failures, that is just inherent in true wizards. This is what lets them to agree despite the initial differences. Yeah.
I think the point Dr. Khrushcheva was making about Kierkegaard and love is very important here. If, take this as an example, if you raise your consciousness to the point where you know that everything that happens to you in life is a result of the decisions that you make, and in addition to that, you commit yourself to choosing the future because you can develop that way, even though it's anxiety-provoking, you will no longer have any basis for feeling like a victim and therefore blaming everybody else around you for making you a victim. And consequently, you will have available to you the ability to appreciate everyone around you, even if they, unfortunately for them, are not aware of the decision-making process and entering into it.
Exactly. If I have no need to blame others, then in a natural way I can love them, or at least feel some respect, compassion. Well, at least. It becomes much easier because...
And you might end up wanting to help them. The very people who, in the past, you thought of as pushing you down, you may very well want to help them. And that's what your patient is doing.
So I remind again just one of the... from Ambrose Bierce's Saturn's Dictionary. So the definition of our neighbor as the person whom we must love as ourselves and who does everything to prevent us from this. Yes. So if we don't,
Instead of making decisions or coming to decisions, I would call it maybe owning the decisions or the choices that we make, since we're always making choices whether or not we're aware of them. But I think in the owning process, there comes great responsibility for what do we do with all those resources that we have, and how do we pay for our decisions, what are the consequences. But at the same time, I think there's also the great freedom that comes with that. I have made this choice at this point, and the choice could be to love others more, or to look at myself as human as I look at somebody else as being human, and so forth. I think the payoff, the currency for owning a choice is probably the increased sense of responsibility and awareness, and and the payoff would be being more alive, being freer to live.
certainly. But one thing I'd like to disagree with Professor Maddy is that, well, probably it's just not disagreement, just some misunderstanding. That I'd never meant that everything that happens to us depends on our decisions. So our decisions bring everything that happens to us. So it's not to such a degree. So we are not God. So but the point is that we can never know beforehand which of our goals can be reached and which will not. We can be sure that many of our goals will never be reached, and but we must try as hard as they can, because many of them we can never be sure that we won't succeed. There is well, I have a little bit time to draw two very important examples. One of them is the case of Viktor Frankl. The one episode from Viktor Frankl's life as described in Alfred Langley's book, well, the psychological portrait of Viktor Frankl. And it was one episode when Frankl was in a concentration camp during the Second World War. And one evening during the he was selected to the group that must the next morning must be directed by a special train to the next to the other concentration camp, and it was known that no one has ever returned from this next camp. It was the camp specialized in annihilation, and every evening there was such a train, and a group of inmates was selected by the camp authorities for this train, and this was alive. And he certainly he knew what did it mean, and he had a very heavy feelings. He had one night just before this should happen, and he didn't know how to cope with this situation, and then he decided, he has come to a decision that no one, well, I certainly, there is not many chances that I would survive. That he thought of suicide, as many did in this situation. But he then come to the decision that no one can guarantee me that I would not survive. So there is certainly. I don't know what can happen that would help me to survive, but I know definitely that no one can guarantee that nothing will happen, and that this is the last night for me. And he spent the whole night in walking and enjoying what he saw around him. And the point is that then the next morning this train did not come, and no one did not know why. No one did know why, and this was the only case during the whole war when this train did not come. So this is an illustration about the limits of our decision, what we can decide, what we cannot decide. Certainly, not everything it can be determined by our own decisions. But what is up to us is to use the space we have, the options we have, the limitations we have, and we can never predict how far-reaching the consequences of our decisions can be. In this case, if Frankl would give up as many of the inmates, he would close the possibilities that suddenly, due to unknown reasons, opened again. So we can one of the reasons that's why we can never be sure. We can never be sure that the life, even if the life is awful and you see no light spot anywhere, no one can guarantee you that it will always be the same, that nothing good will happen. Yeah.
In that same order, if I could tell a Buddhist story, I don't know how many people know this, but probably some people. This man was being chased by a tiger, and he was just running from it, and it was chasing after him. All he saw was finally a cliff, and he jumped over the side, and he was hanging on, and there were rocks below, and then there was a tiger roaring up above. What should he do? And how did it go? And then all of a sudden he saw this beautiful plump ripe strawberry, and he grasped for that, and he had the best strawberry in his life. There are always
this is a story, but what I told was the real fact from the life of a real man. Well, and another thing I'd like.
Something that needs to be said about that story with regard to Frankl. It's wonderful that it turns out the train didn't come. But if the train had come, what would have still been important is that he spent the night walking around and enjoying everything that he saw.
Yeah.
Because he couldn't predict whether the train would come or not.
Yeah. Indeed. And another point also about this, the relations of decisions and something of something we control and something we don't control, is a very interesting principle. That I would formulate it as an existential principle that I would call Gorbov principle, by the name of one psychologist. And the principle is that the shortest way toward our goal is never a straight line. So, Fyodor Gorbov was a psychologist, Russian psychologist. He worked in 50s, 60s, 70s. Worked mainly in military. With different military groups and military psychology. He worked with pilots sometime, and he noticed that a group of pilots has come after a flight, returned back after the flight. They go to the shower, first of all. And the shower is a combined shower, several cabins, 4 cabins, with a common water circulation system. And first 4 pilots come to the cabins. They take a shower very quickly, quite satisfied, go further. Then the next 4 men come in, and they start to quarrel. They spend a lot of time, because with the unified circulation system, when one makes the water hotter, it becomes colder for the others. But first 4 can very easily regulate the shower so that everyone is okay, everyone is satisfied. The next 4 cannot do it. So, and after watching this, he invented a device, a system of kind of amperemeters. So several devices in a unified change, and several persons must turn the handle so that an error must come to a 0 degree at the same time for all of them. But if I try to make my arrow directly to 0, for the others it declines from 0, and this is the test for coordination. We may either try to intuitively coordinate, or one takes some leadership functions and provides some coordination work explicitly. But this device was used for the selection of spaceship teams in the Soviet Union. Very effective things. So to select a good team that would coordinate their efforts. So the point is, the consequences for the existential approach to life is that when we try to reach our goals directly, so we start to interfere. We interfere with the goals of other people, and they interfere with our own activity, and we cannot neglect the goals of other peoples. We must arrange a trajectory of our way to the goal in such a way, according to this Gorbov principle, so that all people could effectively reach their goals, all the involved people. So it's not a straight trajectory. It's some curvilinear trajectory, but it's the most effective, and it leads to the goal in the shortest way. So this is the dialectics of control over one's action and choices and adjusting to the choices of others, to the goals of others. So our time is nearly over, and probably this would be the point I would like to finish the discussion, and probably I would appreciate if you share some impressions, some feedback, something that you would feel worth saying about the some results, dry results. It's difficult. I can only repeat that why it should not be difficult. Well, in fact, I'm speaking of very complicated and serious high-order things in human life activity regulation, and it would be very strange if it wouldn't be difficult. In fact, I already said that the way of least resistance, the easiest way, is to have the consciousness off. To switch it on, it's always some efforts, some investment of some energy, attempts, efforts, and so on. Well, so it's the way. It's a rather complicated way, and it is to be considered from the beginning. Yes, it's difficult, but it pays itself. So it enriches life very much. Once during my just lectures at the university on existential psychology, a student asked me, "So why are you sure that this existential view is right and say psychoanalysis is wrong? You did not prove that psychoanalysis is wrong. This image of a human person and your view is right." I answered, I can't prove you that this view is right or wrong. It's a matter of choice, it's a matter of taste. I prefer to live not in the world depicted by psychoanalysis, but rather in the more complicated and more enriching world depicted by existentialism. It's more interesting, it's my choice. How to awaken the consciousness. And that's what I was doing the 3 hours. So it's just a kind of applied philosophy, just the meaning of this work that can be used within a psychotherapy context, educational context, and other contexts is just to stimulate the philosophizing in a sense. So just the becoming, so to stimulate the critical awareness of the fundamentals of one's own life and one's own life management. So this was only what I presented here. It was only one piece of this work, focused on the problem of life choices. Well, and I used to do this with some other aspects of life. Well, and I'll just complete with one formula of existential way of living, existential way of treating one's life. Probably I hoped to say something about this during this workshop, but now I have no time. I'll just articulate this as a formula in one sentence. The sentence, so the essential of my existential view of life is, it sounds the following way. And this is the foundation for any choice processes, for personal responsibility. You owe no one, but as soon as you want something, when you want something, you have to pay for this, because no one owes you.